got done watching The Last of Us Episode 3, and let's talk about it in full spoiler detail. If this is your first time checking out this channel, I'm a major Last of Us fan. It's my favorite video game of all time, and one of my favorite stories ever told. So the fact that they are adapting it, whew! I've heard a lot about Episode 3, though, and I've heard that this is the biggest deter from all of The Last of Us games so far, and specifically the best episode of the entire show. And I'm like, really? With Bill? And then, okay, we're getting a little, looks like from the trailer, we're getting a little bit more development with Frank. That's cool. I was not ready for how emotionally beautiful, impactful, and gut-wrenching this episode was going to be. And specifically, how many people will probably look at this episode. And I think some game fans will probably be pissed that it's completely different than anything else that's from the game. I think it's okay to make changes, but definitely this is the biggest change yet. But vastly from there, I think something that a lot of us fans need to realize is that The Last of Us, like Neil Druckmann and a lot of the creators have said, is a love story. It's a story about connection, humanity, and in general, finding that love once again. And if there was a way to nail that home and hit a home run out and speak to exactly what The Last of Us is, that would be this episode. So without further ado, going forward, this will be a full spoiler review. If you are new here, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. I do reactions and watch along parties every Sunday right before these reviews go up. So if you want to check those out, make sure to go hit that like and subscribe button. Comment down below and be there for every Sunday. But I definitely want to hear your guys' thoughts. Are you a fan of The Last of Us? Are you just watching the show for the very first time? Let me know down below and let's dive into this. So obviously this episode opens up. They're walking. Tess. I keep saying Tess, but it's really much Ellie and Joel. They're walking. They're doing a lot of walking in this one. They stop for some supplies, and Ellie has an encounter with like a walker, or not a walker. I'm talking Walking Dead now. She has an encounter with one of the infected. Cuts open its head. You see the cordyceps coming out. Nasty, disgusting, right? She gets her tampons, all that stuff. She crawls back up. Joel leaves the machine gun, and they pretty much go on their way. There's a lot of great dialogue moments in there that again expand more of them and really much tie back to the game that I really much just adore and love, but seeing how they're able to really go further into this and give a lot more development is some of my favorite stuff. And a lot of my favorite things from the game is just specifically when you are walking with Ellie and you just have great conversations. And they're walking down the highway and Joel's like, hey, let's stop. Let's go up the hill. And she's like, isn't that going to be hard? And he goes, yeah, but there's something I don't want you to see. And right before that, we see this airplane crash, which was actually that shot of them was the first time that we had seen anything from this show. So it was kind of great to be like, hey, I get what you're doing there. But she goes, what could be so bad? And she runs up ahead and Joel follows her and it's just a bunch of dead people and their skeletons and all their belongings in a ditch. And Joel pretty much explains that, you know, the government was going into these small communities. Even if they weren't infected, if they didn't have enough room, they were just killing them off. And they found that dead people couldn't be infected. And Ellie kind of learned something there. And one of the most subtle and impactful things is it goes down to one of the clothing pieces and it flips and it flashes back to like the day after everything had happened. And we see the lady with that. She's getting in the back of the truck. You see this whole town evacuating. You see Bill underneath just chilling, watching the government. And as they leave, we get Bill pretty much going out and doing what he does best. Now, big changes from here, of course, is it's not a giant town. It's more of just a small community that Bill lives in, so it's not as big and wide vastly. There's also no infected in this town, which is something different than, of course, the games. The town's still infected. There are still the booby traps. We do see that. We see Bill just pretty much enjoying himself until Frank comes along, played by Murray Bartlett. Now, I just want to say right now, Murray Bartlett and Nick Offerman, hands down, should be nominated for Best Guest Appearance in a show next year for Emmy, Golden Globes, whatever you want to say it. They gave some of the best performances I've ever seen in a show, and I honestly think this might be the most impactful, most touching episode of television that I have watched in years. And that's saying a lot because we just had Stranger Things last year, which I loved, and we also have Better Call Saul, which I love the ending. But there's something about this episode that really broke me. I'm trying not to cry again right now like I cried on my watch along, but I love their meetup. You know, he gets stuck in a hole. Bill kind of comes to know him. They have dinner. He plays the piano and they kiss. And the lead up into that and the way that they start to build up the relationship is, again, vastly different from the games. If you played the games, and this is the one time I'm going to spoil something from the games because it's very subtle, and if you don't find it, you don't find it. They kind of mention Frank. They kind of don't. And Bill's kind of more of an asshole. Like, he's a protective asshole, but he's definitely an asshole. And there's a lot of conversations because the whole Bill backstory in the game, you don't really learn. You learn through finding notes and artifacts and collectibles. And it's really just Joel, Ellie, and Bill going through this town trying to survive and find a battery for a car. That's literally this episode. Or at least from the game. In this episode, we spend a majority of the time with Bill and Frank building up that relationship and furthering them out through the years. And, you know, it cuts that Frank's been there for quite a few years. And they're arguing about what Frank wants to do. He might want to have friends. And then he's like, well, I've been talking to someone on the radio. And it was Tess and Joel. And it was great to have that because Bill is kind of like the opposite of Joel. And Tess is exactly like Frank. And they start this bonding. They start the code. We find out how they start the code and their friendship and all sorts of things like that. And then it flashes again. And Bill is, you know, way more fortified. And Joel warned him, one day Raiders are going to come up here. And Raiders do come up here. And Bill fends him off. He gets shot. And for a second, I thought the difference here was going to be Bill dying and Frank being the one that they find there. And that's why the radio was called, that 80s radio that we heard at the end of the first episode. And it wasn't that at all. Because the next flash forward really hits it home. Frank's in a wheelchair. He's dying. They're old as shit now. We're caught up to modern day. And after seeing Frank pretty much struggle for an entire day, the next morning, we find him in his wheelchair. And pretty much he tells Bill, this is going to be my last day. And the emotional moment of him saying that started to really break my heart. And it gave me some up vibes of Carl and Ellie. But instead of like Carl not knowing Ellie was going to die, Bill had to live up to that, to give him the best day ever. And the way that they play that in them getting married and just pretty much Bill giving Frank the best last day of his entire life. It's impactful. It's beautiful. It's the last thing that I really wanted to see, but I also think it's like one of the most important parts about this story is giving us something like that. And when it comes down to The Last of Us, again, the gameplay's fine. I think it's fun and I like it, but I come for the stories. I come for the character. And the characters of The Last of Us really impacted me in this episode. And after dinner, pretty much Frank calls Bill out. And Bill says, yep, there was enough pills in that entire bottle to kill a horse. And pretty much they come together and say, yep, we're going to die together. They go to the room, cuts back to Joel and Ellie. They're going into the camp. Bill and Frank are nowhere to be found. Ellie finds a note and starts to read it to Joel. And from there, they both took their lives. And he left everything to Joel to protect Tess, who is no longer there. And what Joel is now doing is for Tess. He's protecting Ellie. And, you know, he gets a car. They get to stock up. They get some weapons. Ellie gets a gun too, which is cool to see how that was tying in. I like the differences there. And Joel has a serious conversation with her. Like, these are the rules. This is where we're going. We're going to find my brother in Wyoming. Which is awesome to see because, again, that's kind of tying into there. I'm curious to see how that's going, how the brother is going to be interacting, how we're going to get there. So I'm assuming the next episode is probably going to be Sam and Henry. And then probably episode 5, I would imagine, would probably be Tommy in Wyoming. 6, I would imagine, is something that I don't want to get into spoilers. 7 is definitely going to be a big episode, but I'll kind of leave it till there until we get to episode 5. But everything they did in this episode was perfect. It was flawless. I don't want to hear anyone bitching and complaining that they made Bill gay. Because guess what? In the games, he was gay. That was canon. But the big change they did here was that we don't get to see Bill fight off a bloater with Joel and all sorts of things like that, or them going through the school and stuff. This was better in every sort of way that they possibly could have, because it would have just been more of the same that we just saw in the episode 2. This was a touching, emotional, and impactful episode that I think will be renowned as one of the best episodes of all of television ever. This is why you watch TV. I felt something. I'm fucked up from this episode, and I absolutely loved it. Murray Bartlett again and Nick Offerman. Round of applause for you guys. And like I mentioned, how important this episode was again to show that it is Joel's responsibility to take Ellie all the way to where it needs to go. And as we saw that door close, it was kind of that symbolism of the door is closing. It's up to you, Joel, to protect this girl and take her forward. Everything's pointing you in this direction, and I love it. I love how this episode not just reinforced more character development for two characters, but in the span of an hour and 20 minutes, less than that technically, probably like 35, 40 minutes, you come to love two characters, love their relationship, feel emotional for them, and also understand again the thematics of The Last of Us, the love of it, the cherishedness of it, and the most perfectness of it all, as well as pushing why this is Joel's destiny to take Ellie and to protect this girl. I love this episode. I love this show. This episode was a 10 out of 10, and it's one of the best shows. So I can't wait to hear your guys' thoughts. Thank you so much again for watching this. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. And of course, until next time, it's okay. Go get some tissues. Go cry a little bit. But thank you so much again for watching. Stay classy.